Hey there, Pursuing Freedom friends. Thanks for tuning in today. If it's your first time here, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Erin Bradley, and I've got a great interview in store for you today with my friend Kofi Thompson. Kofi and I connected recently when I had the opportunity to be a guest on his podcast, which is called Breaking the Glass Ceiling. And Kofi is the founder of Zion Capital Management, where he helps his community and clients build, manage, protect, and transition wealth through all different types of wealth building strategies, which we are going to unpack today. And as I mentioned, he's a podcast host. He's also, very interestingly enough, a competitive power lifter in the state of Virginia, holding the state's deadlifting record. And through his podcast, he likes to help his audience grow spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally. So, as you can imagine, he's an incredible contribution to the Pursuing Freedom podcast because he has all the components of the well-rounded individual who's living his best life, powered by a business that he's designing to not only fuel his own life, but help so many people. So I think there's going to be a ton to unpack here and to take away for you as the listener for your own wealth building journey, as well as a way to help support your own clients through their journey of building wealth. And I think real estate is just one component of the strategy here. And so I'm excited to dig our teeth into infinite banking and other strategies that Kofi is specialized in. So, with no further ado, I want to hear the whole backstory, Kofi, because I know you have an interesting story that's kind of led you to this passion to serve and inspired to help others through their wealth building journey. So, please welcome to the show, Kofi. And with no further ado, I'd love for you to share.
Oh, thank you so much, Aaron. Man, I feel like I got to take you around with me because that introduction was absolutely amazing. I truly appreciate, just the invitation onto the show, and yeah, excited to share today. So, man, if I think back like 15 years ago, I would have never guessed that I would be, where I am today, running a financial wealth management practice, helping out hundreds of clients. Like I would have never guessed. I actually started when I was younger. I was gonna go down the medical route. That was like my path. I remember my parents used to give me anatomy books when I was like in elementary school. I used to love just like solving problems. I used to love like just understanding like very intricate and complex things. I was a big nerd. Essentially followed that path, up and through high school. And then I had a couple different events that really like had a huge impact on me as I was graduating high school. One, my parents really just weren't doing well, like, with their health and also financially as well too. So I decided to like move out and really just like start my life my own because I felt like, okay, like they're not able to support me anymore. I got to go out and figure this whole life thing out. And I definitely made quite a few mistakes. I was like brash, I was young, I was a bit of a rebel. So I was going out there just like trying to figure out, how to live, a good life essentially. I worked a lot. I went to school here and there. And I did pretty well while I was in school, but like I just kind of felt like this wasn't really my passion. Like this wasn't really like something that I could truly make an impact in. And after also like, working in a hospital, I realized that it's very institutionalized and I wouldn't have had the impact that I could have had, going down and becoming a doctor. So around like 23, 24, I had three big events that really changed my life and actually led me to the career that I am in today. One, I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners have read. And, when I read that book, it completely gave me just a huge frame shift because I really saw like my parents as like, they had followed education their entire lives, but they never did well financially. And then I saw this whole other side of like, wow, like there's this route of like going entrepreneurship and like you can actually have a true impact. You can decide, you can create a vision you want, and then you can, build that vision, put in a lot of hours, but actually have a much better impact on your community. The second thing is that unfortunately, my father had actually gotten sick and gotten diagnosed with terminal cancer. So at this point, I was like thinking, okay, like if I go down the medical route, like I'm not gonna have any time to actually like, help him out, go to like chemotherapy visits. I'm not gonna have any money. In fact, I'm gonna be going into debt. So there's no way that I could actually help him out, financially. And I would have been again like kind of locked up for the next like decade of my life, just like not having the opportunity to, help him out in many different ways. And also when he got sick, I saw the impact of like the things he did not do throughout life, like not investing, not having things like life insurance, no estate planning, no medical directors, powers of attorneys, no wills. And I realized that there's this massive gap for people, especially in the minority communities, because typically they aren't getting the same type of advice. There aren't as many like financial advisors coming into their neighborhoods. So it really started me down this path because when I get like when I choose something, I get a little obsessed with it, and it started me down this path of just like learning as much as I could about wealth, about money, about business, and I realized like wow, like I think this is an area that I want to be in. I think this is something I truly want to do. And so when I learn something, I'm always like telling people about it as well too. I definitely, that it's hard for me to stay quiet if I find something that's, I find impactful or really cool. And I remember I was talking to one of my friends and telling her, I was like, hey, you should start investing now. You're in your 20s. Like if you do this stuff now, like it's going to compound, you're going to grow. And she was like, oh, well, you should go see my financial advisor. And I was like, wait, what is that? Like, I didn't realize there was like a career out there for people they're actually going out and helping people financially. So, I was curious and I was like, yeah, let me explore it. So I wanted to go set a meeting with him, and me and my, nerdy self, I had like one of those little composite notebooks, and I was like, wrote down like, what is life insurance? What is an ETF? What's a bond? What are all these different financial things? Like, I want you to teach me. And I sat down, I think we met for maybe like 2 hours and he was gracious enough just to like, sit down with me, learn a little bit more about my life, understanding that like I didn't want to go the medical route and that I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. And I guess he saw that I had some intellectual curiosity and then also I was kind of good with people. And 3 months later, he ended up or the a director of the firm ended up reaching out to me and was like, hey, like we think you could be pretty good at this career. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing opportunity to get into something that I really intellectually, I'm like, yo, this stuff is super cool. I really love like, understanding and learning about it. And then also too, having that experience with him, I saw that like he was really there to like help people out, like getting to know and understand people, which was again very different than the medical industry. You kind of feel like a number when you go to a doctor's office, but like he was like asking me questions about like my outside of my professional life. So I could really see like the relationship aspect of it as well too. And then coupling with all that, like because I had to take care of my dad, like it also it gave me the opportunity to have more freedom so I could actually go to his chemotherapy appointments. I didn't have to be locked down by like a 9 to 5 or being in school. And I could also start making money so I could actually help him out. So that was in 2019. I got in the career and I was terrible. I did not know like I like the first like I so the thing is like I couldn't really like sell or I couldn't really like do things that I didn't truly like understand. I didn't have the experience or knowledge at that point. So for the first like 6 to like 9 months, I was like just barely scraping by. But I was working my butt off. I think I put in like 80-hour weeks and I was like I had no life outside of just like in this career, and I was learning as much as I could, you know um being like having other financial advisors as mentors so I could learn under them. And I was just like, man, like I got to make this thing work. I got to figure this thing out. After about like 6 to 9 months after I really started to understand more about the industry and I could really start working with people, that's when things started to like really pick up. And I remember like it was the last month in my first year, I ended up making just as much as I made in like complete last year, my career before, as a pharmacy technician. And I was like, man, not only is this career have give me the opportunity to like, help people always like be learning because there's so many different areas of finance that are just I find super interesting, but also too, this is not a career and this is a gateway to give me the freedom. So, you know, I never have someone else in my life that I care about that I, can't help them out medically or something along those lines because I don't have the finances to do so. So, long story short, or short story long, that first year, I ended up becoming one of the top advisors in the southern region of the U.S. In my company, and kept doing that for about 3 years, and then left and started my own company.
So talk us through the strategies that you work through with your clients and also how you've been able to implement those into your own wealth building journey.
The big thing for me is I realize that at the end of the day, it all comes back to like what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. in my opinion, there's many different ways to skin a cat, essentially. There's a lot of different assets out there. There's real estate, there's life insurance, there's, stocks in the stock market, there's things like commodities like gold, bond, silver. And so when I sit down with a client, like I really take really the majority of the time that I start with a client, it's really taking time to understand what do they want their life to look like ultimately. Because in my opinion, at the end of the day, like depending on like what goals you want to achieve, whether you want to start a business or you are a business owner, like depending on what you want to achieve is going to help me and my team understand what is the best way to help someone get there. So I'm never like sitting there, guessing, okay, you should be investing in this, you should be doing all these things before I actually go through the full process of understanding, what their goals are, where they want to achieve things, like whether or not they have family members, all these different aspects. And I pretty much, build out like almost a profile for my client. And then I say, all right, based off what you want to achieve, these are the most efficient and things for you to be doing right now. This is how you should be managing your cash flow. These are some tax opportunities you may potentially have. And from there, we're just continuing to build that ship as we fly, continuing to find different opportunities about how we can, again, maximize what they're doing. And that could be utilizing life insurance. That could be utilizing, stocks and investments, or it could just be finding ways to like help them lower their taxes in retirement or in their business.
So can you walk us through? We were talking before we started recording about infinite banking, which is
Yeah.
something that I understand. And my husband and I set up policies many, many years ago, and we've been able to leverage our policies in our wealth building journey. So I
Hmm.
was hoping that you could explain what the strategy is and kind of break it down for somebody listening, because I think that these two approaches can go hand in hand, whether it's from the perspective of a listener who's maybe serving clients and wants to be
Hmm.
able to introduce their clients to the resources that can help them protect their wealth, protect their assets, build wealth, et cetera, beyond the sale of the home. And potentially for the listener to be able to learn about and possibly implement infinite banking in their own long-term wealth building strategy.
Let me first caveat and say, like, again, it does depend on your goals, and not everything is for everybody, but I will dive into infinite banking. So let me first explain like the differences between two types of, main life insurances. So there's term insurance, and term insurance is not what you utilize for infinite banking, but it's very similar to like renting a house. You pay for a policy, you get a certain death benefit, but you don't really get any other benefits outside of just that death benefit. And if you don't pass away within that term, you're not going to build up any like cash value or any equity. You just have it for like 10, 20, or 30 years. Then there's also permanent life insurance. Permanent life insurance is very similar to purchasing a house. So when you have a permanent policy, in addition to getting that death benefit, you also get cash value buildup that's very similar to equity in a house. Some of the main differences, though, is that with cash value in a life insurance policy, if you're looking at a whole life policy, it's going to have guarantees that that cash value is not going to go down. And as long as you're dealing with the right company, you also will get dividends that come in that will help build up that cash value in a policy. So let's say you set up, infinite banking policy, and you want to utilize that as a safe asset down the road. So, and let me caveat, it does also take time as well too. If you want to like do something within a couple months, not the right asset. This is really a mid to long-term investment. That's one of the biggest things I definitely want our listeners to understand. But you set up a policy, and after some time, it does build up and it does continue to grow. And then let's say you have $100,000 of cash value in that policy. Now, the term infinite banking really comes from the fact that instead of going to a bank and taking out a loan where you're going to pay, let's say maybe 8% for that loan, and any interest that you pay on that loan, you're paying back to the bank. Instead of doing that, you have your own asset that's available to you, and you can take a loan off of that asset, the cash value in your life insurance. And on average, these, life insurance policies, if they're structured the right way, they're going to grow on average around 5 to 6% per year. So let's say you take that loan that's at 8%, but in the policy, your money's still growing. It hasn't been taken out. So it's still growing at, let's say, 6%. So your net cost of that loan is going to be 2%. So one, you're lowering the cost of your actual money that you're utilizing. And then you can put that into an investment, you know, let's say you get 10% on it, your net, returns are essentially 8%. So it can help you out in that sense. But then the interest that you actually pay back from that loan actually goes back into your policy. It doesn't go to like a bank or like another institution. So anytime you're having deductions from interest, it's being taken from your cash value. And then you can also choose how to pay that policy back. You don't have to like, necessarily, if you set your policy up right, you may not ever have to pay back that loan. Or if you do choose to pay it back, you pay it back on your own terms. And again, any of that interest that pays back goes back into your policy.
Awesome. So what have you seen with your clients utilizing that for their own wealth building? Like I know my husband and I have borrowed against the cash value of our life insurance policy as it's accrued over time to
Mhm.
put into another investment, and then we pay it back, and then it continues to compound, and then there's more. So like I think we were paying $5,000 a year or something like that. I don't want to quote numbers, but for however many years, and then it starts to build up over time and it starts to compound, and all of a sudden you're looking at your statement and there's $75,000 or there's $100,000 available that we're able to borrow against, temporarily for some kind
Mhm.
of short-term investment. For example, maybe we buy a piece of property that needs some upgrades, and so we use the funds to finance the repairs, then we do a refinance, cash out refinance, and we're able to replenish the funds and then pay back the life insurance policy, and that continues to
Mhm.
grow. So what other strategies have you seen deployed with your own clients?
Yeah, so it really depends on how creative that individual is, at the end of the day. With some of my clients, where I see it utilized a lot is typically because I work with a lot of real estate investors. So let's say that you want to, flip a property, right? And we'll take that example as like you can take a loan from a bank or you can take, utilize just your cash to flip that property. So let's say you take a loan from a bank and you're paying, 8% on that loan. And let's say you can put $100,000 into a property and get 50%, or let's make it really conservative. Let's say you get a 20% return, on your money. So you put $100,000 in, you're going to make $20,000 off of this flip. Well, if you take a loan from a bank, your net gain, if it takes you a year to flip that property, is only going to be 12% because you have to subtract the cost of the money that you're actually utilizing from the return on investment that you get from flipping that property. Well, instead of doing that, a lot of my clients, they'll go through and say, all right, I have $100,000 in my policy. So let me take a loan from that. And that loan interest may be 8%, but remember that your cash value is still growing at 6%. So the net cost of that loan is actually 2. So it therefore increases your return on investment when you flip that property because instead of getting 12, you're now getting 18%, on
Awesome.
that house flip. It also is utilized. A lot of my clients, they'll utilize it in business as well too. Let's say, I had a client last year who was trying to get a loan for their business because they wanted to expand their mental health practice, but they weren't able to get a loan fast enough. Well, with their policy, because you can, get your money in, as less or as soon as 10 days, from like calling, your advisor or calling the company, they were able to get that loan for $50,000 until they were able to get a loan from the bank, because they had to go through all of their process of checking their credit, checking their debt to income ratios, and all those different pieces. None of that stuff is required when you take a loan from your policy. As long as you have that cash value there, you simply call up the company or your advisor and you can take the cash out. There's no type of verification process. So because of, those factors and it's an asset that you're taking money out of, it really depends on just like how creative, you are with leverage and loans and things along those lines. But I've seen it a lot in real estate flipping and then also helping fund their business or, purchasing a car, for example, as well too. It's a lot of different uses for it.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because one of the things I've been teaching for a very long time is a strategy that helped me to consistently build my business by referral without feeling salesy. And it all comes down
Hmm.
to one thing, and it's being a resource to my clients above and beyond what I get paid to do, which means that when I was a mortgage professional, if they don't need my services except every 3 to 5 years, what does it actually mean to be of value to my clients? Well,
Mm.
typically what it means is I need to be asking bigger questions. I need to be getting in the conversation around their goals and their dreams and
Hmm.
their family, their occupation, all the things. And so with that, for anyone listening who is in a sales role, there's so much more value that can be delivered to your client before the closing, during, after, where you say, hey, Do you have a plan to protect your money? Do you have a plan to build your wealth? Do you have a plan
Mm-hmm.
to protect your asset? You talked about estate planning earlier. And so when you start to have these more high level conversations with your clients, you start to build that authority as a trusted advisor who cares about them at the human level. And when this
Mm-hmm.
happens, I believe it's game over. There's no more
Yeah.
shopping for agents. There's no more
Yeah.
shopping for interest rates because they're coming to you because they see you as somebody who cares about them beyond the paycheck in your pocket, which means that
Mm-hmm.
for anybody listening, whether you have an arsenal of amazing service providers like Kofi or not, it should be part of your plan to build out this tribe. Like an old school Rolodex, you've got to have people in your back pocket that can be of value to your clients above and beyond the transaction. And so that's where someone like Kofi comes in, where I could say to my clients, have you heard about this? And have you heard about that? And none of it has anything to do with me. So I'm not getting all bottled up with feeling salesy because I'm not trying to get
Mm-hmm.
anything out of this conversation. I'm just trying to be a resource. And I can tell you that anybody listening, and I know it's the same for you in your business, Kofi, is that when you care about the client beyond the paycheck, the money takes care of itself. So I know you and I talked on your podcast about this, where there's this idea of how do you connect and be a resource outside your own personal services. And so I just wanted to have you on here because I feel like it's powerful for a million different reasons. And if people want to learn about this financial strategy for themselves, they can contact you. But also, if you want to have a reason to call your clients and say, hey, there's other strategies out there to help you in your wealth building journey. And if you want to continue to buy more real estate, I have people I can connect you with. And that could be a reason they want to meet you and connect with you. So, for all these reasons, I'm glad that you came on and were able to explain that in layman's terms. And I'm just curious if folks do want to find you, follow you, get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
I just want to make a comment on, what you had said there, Aaron, and like I believe it so much. I mean, it becoming irreplaceable in your clients' lives is makes you so valuable as a professional. And like I've definitely, seen the results from like, okay, having, whether it be realtors, loan officers, knowing people at, great restaurants, owners in great restaurants that you can refer someone to, as they come into your town. Like it really like creates this dynamic where like that person knows that they can reach out to you for like almost any problem that you have. And I believe that's again so valuable, and it's so underappreciated, especially in service model businesses like ours. But best ways to reach out, so our website is zioncapital.us. You can also find me on LinkedIn as Kofi Thompson, RICP. Instagram, Kofi the Creator, Facebook, Kofi Thompson as well too. Or feel free to shoot me out an email, kofi@zioncapital.us. More than happy to connect and again see how I can be of value to you.
Well, I also want to ask you, Kofi, what inspired you to start your podcast, Breaking the Glass
Yeah.
Ceiling? Because I want people to make sure to check that out as well.
I appreciate it. So when I was like 20, I want to say I was like 21 at the time. So this was actually another big life event that really changed like my entire perspective. But when I was 21, I was again not doing the right things, not living life in the best way. And I had what I called the punch in the face that God knew I needed actually. So I actually end up getting jumped and having my jaw broken. So I have two titanium plates in my jaw. And when I had that event happen, I mean, life changed for me because again, I was just more so like living out of the past, living out of a lot of hurt that I was experiencing from growing up and not really living for the future. But when I had that event happen, I was like, okay, like this actually gave me more time to think in 6 weeks of having my jaw wired shut to, shut up and just like think about where I was in life. And so after that, I really started to, I made the decision, like, I want to start living for the future. Like, I want to become someone that can be of value to the people in my life, have a family and be someone that can be impactful in my community. And so I started down this huge track of personal growth. First reading Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, got into all the books, podcasts. I was just like consuming as much knowledge as possible, and over like the course of like 6 7 years it really changed my life in so many different ways, especially the podcast, because being able to like hear a conversation or hear something from someone else's perspective, it really allows you to learn from their life instead of learning in our own lives. So I want to do that same thing for other people as well too, and bring on guests that are experts in their areas or that have a message to share or that have overcome something, massive in their lives, and it's allowed them to truly, take another path. I want to do that same thing for other people and just show people that a lot of times, like the people that usually accomplish amazing things, like professional athletes building great companies, they're just normal people. Like there's nothing, different about them. We all, again, we have to overcome things like imposter syndrome and, build up confidence and all these things. And I want to really give people like an outlet or a platform to hear those messages from people so that they can realize that they can also break their own glass ceiling and, truly live the life that they wanted to when they were younger. It shouldn't be just a dream or like this almost idea that seems so far away. So I want to give people the tools, knowledge, and wisdom so they can do that in their own lives.
I love that so much. And I was going to ask you, so apart from the two books you've mentioned, have there been any other books or mentors or other breakthrough moments for you? Because you're right, the only difference between you and someone living the life you imagine for yourself is their decision to do it. And I appreciate that you started this conversation with the transparency of, failing forward and floundering your way to where you are today, and then now having a story to tell, because we are all going to face that struggle in our
Mhm.
pathway. It's never going to be a straight line or a smooth path, and it's definitely not easy. So, who else has helped you to believe in yourself in the moments where you can't find that faith?
Yeah, wow. I've been lucky enough to have so many mentors and people throughout my life that have really poured into me. I want to leave a good book with you guys though that has been so impactful for me. And this book I read about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and that was The Courage to Be Disliked. Um, I unfortunately cannot pronounce the guy's name, but if you look up The Courage to Be Disliked, you'll find that book. And the reason why I feel so strongly about that book is because, especially in the, world we live in today, whether, even before social media, like I believe that we oftentimes live our lives in this way that we don't want to be looked at as like, the bad person. We care so much about what people think, and we usually let other people's, or what we perceive to be other people's ideas impact our lives in so many different ways. And I think that's one of the biggest hindrances that allows people to actually live the life that they want to. And when I read that book, it really changed my philosophy on just like going out in the world and not having this fear of being disliked, not putting so much time and attention because I'm like a recovering people pleaser. In so many experiences I had in life in the past, like I could just see like me making a decision or going a route just because I didn't want to disappoint this person or whatever it was. But that book really gave me the key to realizing, man, like at the end of the day, the only person's opinions that really matter are your own opinions. And if you can sit down and be alone by yourself and be happy with what you're doing and be satisfied and know that you're going the direction, that's all that really matters because most people aren't even going to understand, especially if you're trying to do something big. If you're trying to make a huge impact, in your family or your community, most people are not going to understand. And at the end of the day, like you get to the end of your life and you regret most of the things you didn't do more than you did do. So I think it's just so important to, build up our own like internal compass and then follow the things we want to do and just like, mute all the noise out there. So check out that book. It was very impactful for me.
I've actually never heard of it. So that is unusual. Usually I feel like people mention books. I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, that one too. I love that one too. I love that one too. So I definitely have let the books and the authors and their stories and their mistakes be my teachers. And it's certainly helpful to expedite your own trajectory towards the outcome you want. If you can consume from people that have been before you or hang around people that are ahead of you in the game or whatever the case might be. So I'm going to strongly encourage the listeners, make sure you go find Kofi online or connect with him if you're curious about what he teaches, or if you want to be that connector for your clients to a resource that could be potentially life-changing. A million different reasons to find and follow Kofi. So thank you so much, Kofi, for taking the time to be on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I love this. This was an amazing experience, Aaron.
Awesome. And to all my listeners out there, if you are enjoying the content, I ask you, please send me a message, DM me on Instagram at Pursuing Freedom Official, or shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I love hearing from you. I'd love to know if there's any topics you want to see covered on the show, or if there's any takeaways that have been impactful for you. And as always, if you're enjoying the content, please be sure to leave that 5-star review, because it helps us continue to attract amazing guests like Kofi and help this content get found, so we can help more people on the journey to building a life you don't need a vacation from. I love you. I appreciate you. I'll see you next time.